Hello and g'day. Today I'm going to show you how to make the steampunk paper beads. This is part 2 of the 3 separate videos in my series. If you've missed video 1, you might like to go and watch that so you know how to make these blank beads. I'm using video chapters as markers. Now video chapters will take you to each section of the video that you need to know about. So just say you want to make a certain bead, video chapters will show up on the bar here. So you just slide across, and when you find the part that you want to know about, it'll have a label on it, and then you just go to that chapter. So let's get started. Now I've done one of my blanks in this colour Copic marker, E35. It's a nice light tanny colour. So I've covered that, both my ends and all the way around. And the last video I done, I made this wide faux rusty washi tape. So I'm going to cover this blank with this. So I'll work out how much I need. There. I definitely need about that much. So I'm just going to cut that off. And I'm going to peel that little bit of tape off because this is on that non-stick backing paper. So it's going to come off quite easy. And see how you can see through it? It's like gorgeous tape. It makes up really well. So I'll lay that down there. I'll need a bit of help with this because it's going to stick to my fingers. Right. Now that's the reason I've coloured this, because you can see through it and I don't really want to see the white through it. So I've gone the colour. So we can start off with the straight edge. So I might turn it around. Now I want to put it on nice and straight. I'm not going to put it on the seam. I'm going to hide the seam and put the seam around there. So we'll put that on there first, and then I'm just going to stick it down on this side, and then I'm going to roll it around. Now when it gets to about there, I'm going to just cut that off. I'm just going to hold it with my nails and cut it straight down there. And then I'll just peel that top bit of sticky tape off. There we go. And just cut around. Cutting around it all the way around and remove it. So that looks pretty cool. So use your homemade rusty washi tape to make a bead. I've already gone and got a bolt out of the shed, and I've put a little bead spacer on top of the bolt and glued my eyelet post in place. So I'm going to put some little rivets down the side. I've already used some texture paste. I can't see them good enough, so I want to make them just that little bit more prominent. And I'm going to put some pewter pearl drops on here. But before I do that, because once you use these pearl drops, you can't touch the bead. So before I do that, I'll just put the bottom bead cap on the bottom of this bead. So I've got my eye post, I've got my bead cap. You can use anything at all to close off the bottom, whatever you've got. Get inventive. Like I said, I've used a bolt. There's just a normal flat bolt on one side and shaped on the other, and I finished it with a bead cap. So whatever you've got, you can put another one on the end. You can put a washer on the end, and then another one of these little brass spacers. So when I put this little eye pin down in here, I want it to stay there. So I'm going to make sure that I've got enough glue all the way down inside of this. so that when the pin goes down into the bead, it's going to stay put. I'm going to put a bit more on the inside of this bead cap just to make sure it's glued at the top here. I've got that little bit left over as well. That's just to make double sure. My glue is still there. I'm not pushing it right down into the bead. Rightio, now that I know that that's going to hold quite well. I'm not pushing my eyelet post all the way in. I'm just leaving a tiny little bit of the neck out. So while that's drying, I'm not going to try and hang my skull from that, because if I do that, it's going to pull that pin straight out. This E6000 needs hours and hours to dry. That's the only downside of it, but the upside of it, it's as strong as. So when I leave this to dry, I will leave it overnight before I put this on. It'll stay there. It's not going to fail. So I'm just going to get the pearl drops out, and the way these work is you just do tiny little squeezes until it comes out and drop off little fake rivets just in little dots of rows of dots, and the pewter will match the silvery ends that I've got on here as well. I'm putting the smallest amount on, so I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll finish that up and I'll show it to you when it's finished. Now this design here I consider fairly easy. I've made my basic tube bead and I've coloured it. I've used dark bark E49 in the Copic. So I've coloured the ends, both ends, because when I put my bead cap on, I'm going to use it for a bead end. When I put that on there, it's sort of a bit see-through, a bit filigree. So I don't want to see the white paper. This one I'm going to cover with leather thonging. So I've got my leather thonging here. I got this from Spotlight in Australia. You could also just get some hot glue and put some dots of hot glue all over this here. So just put random dots of hot glue. You could colour it with the rub and buff or the Goldfinger. That would work quite well. So there's a few different ways that you could mimic this look if you can't get any thonging. So all thonging is strips of leather, and this particular one has got little studs on it. So there's a card of this, and I've just got my piece out and cut it into the length. Now I've got 5 pieces here. It goes all the way around. You have to work out how far apart you need to put your thonging. If you butt it together like this, you might get all the way around the end and work out that you've got a space left. So you have to do a dry run first and figure out where's it gonna end. See there, if I butt them up, you've got all that space left on that side. So you have to do a dry run and shimmy them around and just work out, okay, I need a little bit of space between each piece of thonging. And I've done that on here, and you can see just that tiny bit of space in between each one. I'm going to use 2 glues, the first one being the art glitter glue, and that will be to glue our little thonging pieces down. It actually holds on to the leather really, really well. And once you stick this down, it stays there too. So make sure that it's nice and straight. And being leather, if it's a teensy-weensy bit long that way, you can just even it up either end and then squish it down in the middle and just glue it into place. Make sure it's straight. Once your first one is straight, that'll be your guide to put all the others on. Leave another gap there, and see where the kink is in the leather. It will just glue itself out. You don't have to worry about it. It's not like fabric ribbon where you can iron it or do anything. You know, you can't. You could probably dampen it slightly and put a weight on it for a little while. You could probably do that, but you know, for this, when you glue it down, it just stays there. Alright, now I'm just going to roll that just to get it nice and flat. Straighten any up if you think it's a bit crooked, and run your needle down anywhere you see any glue if you want to rub any off. Okay, now we're ready to put the ends on. Now I've done two styles here. I've put a little lobster clasp on the top of this one and just a little bulb pin on the top of this one. Seems like most people have access to these, so I'll use that one on this one. Right, now you'll need an eyelet pin. Now I'll show you how to use these. Now we're going to glue this in to here. And I'm going to use my E6000 glue for this one. This one you need to leave overnight. Once we put the glue in here, I don't want you to use this bead overnight. I don't want you to hang anything on the bottom of it until it cures. So we'll get it all ready. So I'm going to use half of this pin for the top and half for the bottom. You can use 2 pins if you want. If you're not real confident in making your own eyelet, just get a second pin. So we'll cut that one in half for the top, and I'm going to make a new eyelet for the bottom. Like I said, grab another pin and just cut it. Right, but I'm going to show you how to make one so you end up making another pin out of the bottom of this one. So you just need your double round nose pliers. I'll put a piece of white behind it so you can see a bit better. Put your pin right between the two and hold them like you're holding it with a pair of tweezers, and close them just flush with the end. Then start turning it around so you're forming a loop. All right, see how I'm starting to bend it? You're forming a loop. Now I'm going to shimmy these around, let them go, but I'm not really letting them go. I'm only doing that to show you. And you're just letting them go and you're curling it. And you can see it starting to curl. So I'm going like that, but I'm not opening them a lot. I'm only opening them a little bit. I'll do it again just to show you again. Hopefully I can do it on a side angle. So I've pinched the top and I'm curling it around that way, and I'm bringing it back and I'm curling it around and around until it forms a loop. Now, hopefully you can see it a bit better that way. Right, now I've got my loop. I'm going to sort of see how it's sort of facing forward a bit. I'm going to now bring that back. I can either do it there, or I like to do it in here and just bend it back a little bit. See how now it's got that nice straight pin with an eyelet on the end. So that's how you make your own eyelets. So we can now use that at the bottom out of the same pin. So I'll get some of the E6000 out. I just take a little bit out and put it on my mat. And I'll get my pokey tool. And I'm going to put a little bit of this glue down into the hole. Because I want the pin, when it goes down into the hole, I want it to set into this glue. And the cap itself will then set on top of this little bead. I don't want any to come right out to the edge here. I'm going to pop this in the top of the cap, so it just needs to be hanging out there like that. And I'm going to put a little bit more glue in here because I want that pin to be glued into place and be quite strong. I don't want it to fail when it's hanging off a tassel or hanging off my book. Now I'm going to thread that in. I'm going to thread it gently because I don't want too much glue to push down. Now that fits on there perfectly. I want a tiny bit of that pin hanging out, the neck of the pin, just a tiny little bit. So I don't want to push the pin all the way in. I just want it to be out ever so slightly. Now because the E6000 takes a little while to dry, I'll keep coming back and repositioning where that goes. I'll do the same on the other end because I'm going to have a hanging bead at the top and a dangly bead at the bottom. So I'm going to push some down into the hole and that'll hold the pin into place. Need some more glue. I'd rather add a bit more than waste too much of it. Put a little bit around the top of the bead because that's where the cap sits without going right to the edge of the bead because I don't want any mess squishing out and making my bead look messy. All right, I'm going to put my bead cap, I'm going to put my pin in my bead cap like that. And fill it up with glue. Turn it over and feed it in without pushing the glue too far down and sitting it in place. Now you can line up the top and the bottom to match. It won't really matter because we're going to put another eyelet on here. We're going to put another one of these O-rings on here, and so it won't matter what way that one there is facing. It won't matter at all because when you've got one of these on there, it'll spin around any way at all you want it to. Same with that one. So it's got another O-ring on it, so it will turn around any way you want it to. So see how that's kept moving? That's the only thing with this E6000. You've got to keep coming back and repositioning these caps. So there's another design for you. I'll just get this cleaned up and I'll show you another one. This bead here, I painted all of it just straight out brown. I used my brown Copic. This one was pretty easy to do. Then I used a CRACKLE. This is a one-step CRACKLE medium. So it was just straight out brown. Nothing fancy whatsoever. Then I put a reasonably thick coat of this crackle on here. I put a skewer in it, just popped a skewer in the bottom of the bead before I put the end caps on, and then just poked it in some styrofoam to dry. When that dried, I had this wonderful crackle effect. Then I got my gold finger out and put a very small amount of it, made sure it wasn't too much on my finger, wiped a bit off, and then just went over it very gently and highlighted the crackle even more. So that gave a really wonderful finish. I was really happy with the way that one finished. The skull, that is a bead, the skull bead. I also used this here to paint the skull, the metallic rust. And then I just put a very small amount of the highlight of the gold finger. And I mean a really small amount, just hit and miss, just to make the two blend in. The screw I picked up off the ground and I used that for an end cap. It fit perfectly. And just put the eyelet and a bead in the top. That there is just a bead cap as well, and glued that in with a bead underneath his skull. And I love that one. That one turned out really, really nicely. This one here is really cool as well. Probably the simplest and one of my favorites. It's actually a teapot and it does stand up. Before I tell you any more about this bead, I'll show you how I made the bead itself, how I finished this look. Just make your blank tube bead, just the long one. You need a scraper or a artist scraper and some texture paste. And I'm just going to randomly go like that, just little pats all over it. And just do that all the way around. Now I'll set that aside to dry. Painting this texture piece is really easy. Now it's dry, I'm just going to grab some black. You can do it in brown. I've got a skewer with a stopper on it, so when I put that in there, it's not going to fall all the way to the bottom. So then I can stick it on here. So I'm just going to paint it, let that dry, and then I'll be back to show you how to put the metallic paint on. Now this bead is dry, so I can get ready to put the metallic rust colour over the top. Now remember I said this is a dry brush, so you get a little tiny bit of the paint, you need the smallest amount, and take off the paint, take it off the brush. Right, so you're left with a very small amount, and then just dry brush over the top. Now see how I'm just getting those raised bits? Now see how it's highlighting all the texture paste? I need to bring this back because I can't hold it and paint the bead. So just get a little bit more of that paint off there. I'm not going to dab it back in because it's got to remain dry. And just go around it like that. You can add more, but if you put too much on, you can't take it off. You have to go back over it with the black. Leave that to dry. This one is now nice and dry, and I can go ahead and finish it. It's got little feet on the bottom. I used a cog out of the clock set to glue that on the bottom, and then the bottom of the teapot on there. Usually the bottom of that teapot would come all the way up here, and you would use it in, you know, a bracelet or something like that. Instead, I put it all the way down the bottom of the bead, put a round black bead at the top. There's nothing in between the bead and the top of this bead, my tube bead. And just put the eyelet down into the glue like I've done on the other ones. Just glued it into here, and I've got myself a fairly robust, all of them. They're all, because I've used this E6000, everything has glued together really well and it will stay there. These, I can drop them and I know I'm not going to damage them. They're quite strong. But this one here and this one here, I think they're very simple, but they look very, very cool and very, very steampunk. Right, now this one is another easy one to do. All it is, again, is a blank. I've made my bead tube. I've coloured it black. Use your Copic marker or a Sharpie, whichever one you want. I've got all these little, they're brass screws. They're a 9mm brass screw. You need tools for this one. You need a pokey tool and you need a screwdriver. So I'll just get my little screwdriver out. These are Phillips head. The Phillips head look really cool. So we've got our pokey tool, and I just use this for resting on as well here. So I'm going to start off just doing a random hole. Now when you push into the paper, because it's paper, it will want to flatten your bead. So don't push into it and try and poke a big hole. Just push gently and twisting this pokey tool, twist, 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 like that, until you start digging a hole into the paper. I'm going to go bigger twist, and I'm giving a little bit of pressure, but I'm not pushing, just a little bit of pressure until I started a hole. Then I'm going to get my screw. It's no different than drilling for woodwork. And I'm going to poke it in that little hole, and then I'm going to start screwing. I'm using my fingers for support, and I'm gently screwing it. No different than screwing it into a piece of wood. You'll see the paper flexing a little bit, even though it's solid, but it's still hollow in the middle. So I'm not going to take it all the way in. I have checked, these tiny screws won't come out the other side. I don't want them to come out the other side. I've stopped there, but I can take it up just a little bit further like these ones. Then I'll just move it around and I'll go randomly, do the same again. Need to hold it firmly, and off it goes. They're so easy to screw in, they're not hard at all, and just keep going. Now the reason I've got these here is because when you start getting to this side, you can't hold it down. So when you're putting it here like this, and I never put one directly across the other side, I'll put them in a different location. If you feel it starting to dent your paper, back off that pressure. I won't finish this one on camera. You get the idea of it. You just keep on going around and around. Once you're finished, put your bead caps on the end, just the same as I showed you on the last bead, which was this little one here. And you can put more beads on the bottom here, or you can put a chain like this one. Any of these chains. Very steampunk. So this is the end of video part 2. Please go to video part 3 for the steps on how I make these amazing steampunk paper beads. I'm Donna. Bye for now.